The surfing board, without a doubt a surfer's best friend, has evolved quite rapidly over the last century, and in this video we will explore its evolution. There are very small amounts of evidence found in historical documents to suggest that the practice of wave riding actually dates back to the 11th century within the city of Hangzhou, China. Of course, it was not regarded as surfing back then. Despite the lack of evidence, researchers believe the surfboards used around this time by the Chinese fishermen were incredibly heavy and made of wood. Surfing was officially documented for the first time by William Anderson in 1777 aboard Captain Cook's ship by the Polynesians, who surfed with varying surfboards based on their status and social classes. For geographical reference, the Polynesian islands are located within the Pacific Ocean and include the likes of New Zealand, Hawaii, and the Easter Island. The surfboards used by the Polynesians were made of koa, breadfruit, and willy trees due to their unique qualities. Koa trees, for example, represented bravery and well-being. Breadfruit trees exuded sap used to build surfboards, and willy trees had excellent buoyancy. From there, three types of surfboards were created: the alea, the pepo, and the olo boards. Alea and pepo surfboards were used by commoners. The alea boards were thin and had aesthetic qualities that resembled some boards today, while pepo boards were short and used for belly surfing. On the other hand, olo boards were only to be used by royalty and could be as long as 16 feet. Over 100 years later, and wooden surfboards were still the norm. Boards around this time were made from California's redwood trees and known as solid surfboards for their one ingredient design. The solid surfboards were as short as 10 feet and as long as 20 feet, and range in weight from 75 to 200 pounds. By 1926, surfing was gaining rapid popularity, and as more consumers began to surf, more people began complaining about the weight of the current surfboards. This led to the first radical innovation, the creation of the hollow surfboard. The hollow surfboard was created by American entrepreneur and fellow surfer Tom Blake when he figured out that to improve a board's performance, the surfboard itself needed to become lighter. Although his boards still weighed 100 pounds, he ended up drilling hundreds of holes into his surfboard and covered the major pieces of the board with thin layers of redwood. This aesthetical enhancement drastically improved its performance, and his hollow boards became the first mass-produced board only 4 years later. By 1932, new surfboards made from South American balsa wood had captured all the attention. These boards weighed roughly 35 pounds and completely took over the surfing world. In 1935, Tom Blake had another major breakthrough by creating the single fin, which is located below the surfboard's tail. The fin helps control the board's balance, speed, and the surfer's ability to make sharper turns. Nevertheless, one major problem still persisting was the overall poor design and horrible performance. The 1950s brought what many considered to be the most radical innovation in the history of the surfboard, the rocker. The rocker is the overall increasing and outward concavity of a surfboard, which begins at the tail and ends at the nose. Robert Simmons, who is also known as the father of the modern surfboard, created the rocker through trial and error in his own home. His own surfboard is famously known for its concave nose, and thus given the name of Simmons' spoon. The idea behind the rocker is for a surfboard to have an upward and increasing curve at the nose, so when you're catching a wave, the nose of the board doesn't penetrate the water, but rather skims above it. This allows the surfer to gain forward momentum and become more stable. This innovation also proved to be incredibly important to the safety of the surfers, since many surfers have died at sea due to being swallowed by the ocean's waves. By the early 1960s, new advancements of synthetic materials continued to aid in the development of better performing surfboards that were lighter and more flexible than wood, yet equally as strong. The implementation of foam, polystyrene, and polyurethane boards became the industry benchmark and remained that way until the mid-2000s. On the other hand, by the end of the 60s, boards began to shrink in size thanks to George Greenough and Pete Brewer, two Americans who discovered that shorter boards granted surfers more control over their movements. This led to the popularity of the 5 and 6-foot boards professionals use today. By the early 1970s, Patrick O'Neill developed a simple yet extremely useful innovation that we still see today. Otherwise known as the leg rope, the logic behind the leash is to prevent the surfboard from washing away from the surfer whenever the surfer would fall into the water. The 70s and 80s also brought change to the surfboard single fin system, as the introduction of additional fins meant more control. Contemporary surfboards use a variety of different shaping technologies and techniques, as well as synthetic materials such as foam core, styrofoam, fiberglass, and various protective layers. This is done to ensure that maximum buoyancy, strength, and performance can be achieved simultaneously. If we take a look at this chart, we can see that surfboards originated as plain wooden boards with no bells or whistles. Over time, the surfboards became hollow, and while they did remain wooden, I would argue this innovation was radical due to its drastic and aesthetical overhaul that officially started the era of surf culture. Next came the single fin, which I would argue was an incremental innovation because despite its boost in performance, nothing else really changed about the surfboard itself. The next phases include the rocker and the origin of synthetic boards, which I would argue are radical innovations. The rocker completely revolutionized how surfers rode waves, and the implementation of synthetic materials marked the end of an era for wooden surfboards. Lastly, I would argue that shortboards, the leash, and research and development towards lighter surfboards are all incremental innovations, because these improvements have simply added to the existing surfboards without causing any major disruptions. With surfing gaining worldwide popularity, the commercial side of the sport is there for the taking. We already see tons of logos on surfboards and wetsuits, so what about something more tech related? One idea could be to partner with tech companies and create surfboards with built in sensors. This could help surfers track specific analytics using real time information to immediately incorporate into their next wave, resulting in better performance. Due to newer technologies, we're starting to see the rise of electric surfboards and even the growth of eco friendly boards made from recycled materials. However, the future is yet to be seen, but it seems like the coexistence of technology and surfing is inevitable.